Spooky, spooky, spooky. Here I am recording. Here we go. Marc Ginsburg's daily viral video number 3, take 3. No, viral video number 7, take 3. And you can't see me because I'm in the dark. And I've got to drive, so I'm going to be even more in the dark. But just as I'm getting in the car, I'll give you a little facial. The guy in the shadow. Okay, when I did take 2, it erased. Whoop, there goes my car not starting. There we go. So how are you today? Well, no way for me to know that unless you make a comment on my YouTube posting, Facebook posting, or reply to my Twitter posting. So this is viral video number 7, and the topic is going to be the brave protestors who are risking their lives to allow freedom of expression and speak truth to power at the Donald Trump rallies. The ones who have made the news, even though they may be nameless. Because this is a battle that's being waged right now between the forgotten 98% or 99% and the 1% or 2% that make the headlines all the time. And this is really a battle, like I said in my last video, to wrest the sword of tyranny away from it and force it to surrender to democracy, as I mentioned when I talked about the quarter. I want to really talk and speak about how brave and how wonderful those people are that have the courage to go to Trump's rallies and to stand up for freedom of expression, for real dialogue. And of course, as people in power always do, people who fear democracy, he strong-arms them. He has his men strong-arm them out. And in a few cases, some of his supporters were beating up people. Of course, he denounced it afterwards. He says, I didn't encourage that. But at the same time, he talked about beating up people. He talked about throwing them out. He even spoke about his protesters that way. And in the sea of mostly white men who are old, not entirely, there are some women, there are some young people in the crowds that he has. I mean, he's not lying when he says he has all the demographics supporting him. But what's noticeable is that the people who are protesting, the ones that got beaten up, are African Americans. Are we surprised or are we not? Now, anyway, my contention and what I really want to say is these are the freedom marchers, the freedom riders. These are the people who are doing today what the people did in Selma in 1965. And that's why I really believe history is being made by these people. Much more so than the ones that go safely to the Hillary Clinton rallies or the the Bernie Sanders rallies. It's easy to do that. But I bow and deeply bow and respect those who have the guts to really lay their lives on the line for democracy and freedom and for everything that Hillary and Bernie say they want to protect in this country, and which we direly need them to, one of them at least. this is really this I think underscores what America is really about. I did speak in the video in take 2 that unfortunately didn't get recorded about the obvious parallel between these times and the early 1930s. The only difference being Germany, like America at the same time, was in the midst of a really brutal depression. The German currency was worth practically nothing. So that means if those who were lucky enough to even have money had something that was really worth nothing. And times were desperate. But it should be noted that the Germans in the Weimar Republic, which is really the first, I believe it was the first democracy in a unified Germany, right after they had been defeated in World War I. They were very educated people, like Americans today, although the level of education among many Americans has gone down from what it was about 50 or 60 years ago, unfortunately. There's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into now, because I want to stay on topic. The point I'm trying to make is they were, quote-unquote, civilized people, these Germans. Of course, now we know that they supported a man who did horrendous things to people. I mean, he didn't just have his thugs go in and beat people up, which they did. I mean, that's obviously something we all know. That's one of the minor things. I mean, he just had his armies. I mean, he rounded up people who were Germans, to say nothing of the people when he went into Poland and all the other places. And of course, they were the people that traditionally had been looked at as not to be trusted. Foreigners. At that time, it was a different Semitic group than the one that Donald Trump's people think of as evil. It wasn't the Muslims, it was the Jews. Their cousins, the Jews. So it's a thing very few people like to entertain. By the way, Jesus Christ was a Semite, being Jewish, and he probably looked most like one of today's Muslims. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is Hitler's view toward the Jews is exactly the same as Donald Trump's views toward Muslims. And although unfortunately I haven't really studied it, and I'm sure some of you might be able to help me with this, Hitler was very much more civilized looking and sounding in his earliest appearances. It wasn't until later on, after he had seized power, he became the chancellor of a democratic Germany. He won by quite a significant landslide in a democratic election. This is what a lot of people today don't know. They think that it was a military junta that seized power, a coup. No, it wasn't a coup at all. It was an intellectual coup, you could say that. A mental coup where he stole the minds of people. And this is something that we have to really be on the lookout for all the time, because it's in a democracy that this can happen. All you have to do is brainwash and fool enough people to use that instinctive fear, that instinctive, the things that the animals have, where the alpha male dominates and becomes like the de facto dictator of the group, which they welcome because that's like order. Democracy is very messy. Freedom is extremely messy. In the animal kingdom, animals, among mammals, especially today with survival. Actually, survival was always a very fragile thing for animals because any moment you could be invaded by another species, you could be starved out by a limited food supply, and for this reason it was expedient for them to give up their freedom and coalesce around an alpha male. Now, we could go on forever about a whole thing about what's better for humans, but I think that most of the people in the United States, and even most of the people supporting Donald Trump, truly believe that they don't want to give up freedom, and they believe that Donald Trump will protect their freedom. In fact, ever since the Tea Party scam, which is put out by the 1%, by the way, they've brainwashed a lot of people into thinking that the government is taking away your freedom. The government, by the way, the government that was set up to be of, by, and for the people. The government that's supposed to protect us from individuals who seize too much control and power. And the best way to hide the fact that you're stealing their money, you're stealing their power by basically holding the economy hostage, which is what the wealthy 1%, the bankers, the people on Wall Street do. And, Hitler also did the same thing. He said it was those Jewish bankers that were the cause of all the trouble. And this is exactly what the Tea Party was saying in 2010, when a lot of you were stupid enough to stay home and not vote when you should have. And the result of your not voting was the gerrymandering of the House of Representatives, which probably will, even unless there's like a mass defection from the Republican Party, which I don't see happening, it's going to stay in Republican hands until and unless people get out in droves in the midterms in 2030. Maybe 2020 we can turn it around. But we have to keep it that way. And that's why 2030, 2050, 2070, and 2090. Okay, this is something that, especially if you're young or if you have children, is very important. The midterm years are crucial because the first article of the Constitution invests power in a Congress. And the most powerful branch of government in the United States is the Congress, not the executive branch. This is a delusion that many people in the United States suffer from. Now, it is true that the president since the time of George W. Bush, who preceded Barack Obama, his administration was the first one that expanded the powers of the president using the security issues of 9/11 as the reason. President Obama has been very comfortable maintaining that, especially with a very intransigent and belligerent Congress that was simply going to say no to anything he proposed. The irony being that almost all of them were proposals that originally were Republican ideas, which is why a lot of the unpopularity that was showing up in the polls were not from the right, but from the left. People were disappointed in Obama. But what I'm trying to tell you is that Hitler in the early 1930s came into a democracy, managed to fool many people who were normal members of society. These people were not skinheads on the outside, on the fringes. They were not crazies. They were normal people. But there were also people who were suffering. And they were ready for anyone who would promise them something. And when he started in about the bankers, the Jewish bankers are the reason for your problems, people were, they just flocked to him and elected him, and then the horrors that we all know about it. Actually, that's the thing, we don't all know about it. And that's the really alarming and concerning thing. And I think the people who least know about them are the people who are supporting Trump very blindly, even as he switches and changes positions. They're behind him 100% because we like him. He makes us feel good. He's got the same kind of dig into people that Adolf Hitler had. That same charisma. Hitler was a much better looking person when he first came into power. The pictures that we see of him at the height of his dictatorship, he obviously looks like a madman. I mean, and it's shown that way because he was our enemy, and we're in revulsion about him. So I mean, there is nothing more noble than these people who are going into the rallies and putting their lives on the line and getting into a lot of danger so that they can protect our democracy. And they're not even doing it the way George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, the people who fought the Revolutionary War did. Those people, if these people did what the founders of America did, they would be called terrorists. They'd all be put into prison without a trial. And maybe, maybe with the Obama administration still in power, they might have some way out of it. But they're doing it in the civil disobedience way, the nonviolence. That's why more than anything, these people are the next generation of freedom marchers. The people who walked over the bridge in Selma and got beaten and bludgeoned, many of them injured. So that's why we really need to be proud of these people. And that's my message to you. When you see those protesters, remember, these are the freedom fighters. Because I guarantee you, back in the 1960s, the freedom fighters were looked on as disruptors. Just as these people are. But I think that because, fortunately, so many Americans are reviled by Donald Trump, both Democrats and Republicans, we can be proud and glad that there's sympathy going out to these people and a lot of anger going out toward the violent white men who are beating them up. I noticed I think there were two cases where one guy was like a 70-year-old guy, the other guy was a 78-year-old guy. And these people have so much anger. I understand they're frustrated because the 1% has stolen from them. They have every right to be frustrated. But their anger is so misplaced. They don't want their illusion to be shattered. And it's going to be a struggle. In the early 1930s, America was in a deep depression. Definitely not as bad as Germany, because America had been the victor, one of the victors, and they weren't as affected by what happened in Europe. They weren't ravaged by war. We weren't ravaged by war. We just helped the French and the English win the battle against the Germans. The Germans were a lot more ravaged than we were, so their situation was a lot more dire. Yet nonetheless, we were in a really brutal depression anyway, when Franklin Roosevelt was elected to power, around the same time that Adolf Hitler was elected to power in Germany. Both democracies, both the free will of people that would seem on the outside to be reasonable, sane, well-educated people. And so we can see the two very different paths these nations took. Now, America is being given the choice between these two paths. So this is why this election is so important. I'll talk in future videos. I gotta go now, but I will talk in future videos about how wonderful it would be to have Paul Ryan as the Speaker of the House in a Trump presidency. Because the reality is, even with the executive power, which is dangerous and can be dangerous in the wrong hands, the House, as we see with Obama, has a lot of power to block things. And Paul Ryan is no ardent fan of Donald Trump. He's not that kind of person. He's a very strong fiscal conservative. He'll make the majority of us really suffer with the pains of austerity, but he will not, he's not going to just allow Donald Trump to say or do anything he wants. Both of them are good at making deals. Donald Trump's way of making a deal is to bully somebody. That's always been his way. So he says, I know how to make deals. He knows how to make deals by manipulating people. But Paul Ryan is not that gullible. And that's why he'll be a good thing. Of course, in the kind of presidency that most of you and I want, which is a Hillary Clinton or a Bernie Sanders presidency, Paul Ryan will be a really horrible roadblock. Here we got the same guy. He could be really good in one type of administration and really bad in the other. But again, I don't want to take that chance. Because Donald Trump is a schemer and he's a very shrewd manipulator.